kitty.
The following stories are from a female's perspective. Number 3. This happened when I was 16, during a huge ice storm in the Kansas City where I grew up in. My boyfriend at the time had suggested that we go sledding, since school had been closed for the day. So we headed over to a hill by a highway near our school to meet up with some friends, another guy and 3 other girls who came together. While we were sledding, we noticed a large panel van pull up at the bottom of the hill, but we didn't think too much of it. When the snow started to get too messed up, we moved to the other side of the hill. My boyfriend and the other guy went down the hill, and a man got out of the van and started watching us. Now, this is already starting to get a little creepy and strange, but the feeling was intensified by the fact that this man was wearing a surgical mask. The guys decided to go down and talk to the man and see what was going on. In retrospect, this was a terrible idea. We all should have just gotten out of there. So the guys asked him what he wanted, and he offered to let us warm up in his van. The guy said no, and he copped an attitude and drove off. If this ended here, I probably wouldn't have thought much of it. But he came back and parked, left again, circled the block, and parked again. Then he got out of the van and started to approach us. At this point, we were all about to head out, and the guy sent all of us ladies to the cars and headed the man off. We watched from a distance, and later this is what the guys told us the exchange consisted of. "What are you doing?" "I was just watching you." "Well, we don't like you watching us." "Yes, I do." "I didn't say you didn't like it. I said we didn't like it." "Well, I don't give a fuck." After that, the guys walked back to the cars as the man stormed back into his van. He drove by all of us on the way out. It was really unnerving, and we wouldn't let our other guy friend walk home. His mom told him that he was not supposed to be in anyone's car because the ice was so bad. But we figured an icy low-speed car accident would be less harmful than getting picked up by some terrifying pervert in a van. Number 2. This encounter happened a while ago. For some background, I live in a country area in Ohio. Down a long drive, fields on 2 sides, and woods in the back. I'm about a mile or so from town, so if I need to call the police, I have to call the sheriff. I live with my husband and my boxer. The night this happened, my husband was getting some overtime at his factory. It was Saturday, and he was working 3rd shift. I spent the evening at my parents' house. I didn't head home until around midnight. I stopped in town at a 24-hour gas station to get some drinks and chocolate and beef jerky for my dog, Eliza. As I exited the gas station, I get this feeling that's so strong, I just had to look around, because I knew that someone was outside with me, watching me. Over to my left, about 20 feet away, was this girl in a really cute dress with a white horse mask on, just standing there. We stared at each other for about a minute before I hopped into my car and quickly pulled out onto the road, almost hitting a light pole as I checked my back seat for danger. That was unnerving to say the least, but I was home in just a few minutes, giving Eliza jerky and eating chocolate while watching TV. All of a sudden, my dog takes off down the hall to the back porch, barking and growling and attacking the window. I run in there, afraid that the window was going to get broke again. Eliza had broke the window once before trying to get a coyote. I stopped, dead in my tracks. There, standing at the window, was the girl in the horse mask. Again, we stared at each other. I looked over to the back door. I couldn't remember if I locked it or not. Horse Mask looks over to the door. I slowly walk over to it. So does Horse Mask. We both reach for the knob. Whew. Thank God it was locked. Horse Mask looks behind her for the first time, and I also look around in my backyard. There was a guy in my backyard with a horse mask on as well. I'm like, okay, this is enough. I'm calling the cops. I got Eliza, shut the door to the porch, and went into the living room to grab my cell phone. Of course, I left my phone in the car when I carried my stuff in the house. It was still in my car that was in my garage, my very dark garage. Basically lacking any choice, I opened the door to the garage and tried to open my car door, but guess what? I locked it, and I didn't have the keys. So I crept back into the house. There was no sign of Eliza, and there was no horse mask in my backyard that I could see from the kitchen window. I grabbed my keys and got the phone. I called the sheriff and told them what happened, that I was followed home and was alone. They asked me if they were still outside. I looked out of the windows room by room and saw nothing, until I got to my front yard. Right out front, they were just standing there, about 100 feet away, holding hands, just staring at my house. I honestly was crying at this point to the dispatcher, who assured me that someone would be out there soon. As I stood there, the girl in the horse mask waved. Then they walked hand in hand down my lane and out of sight. It took 10 minutes for the sheriff to get out there, and they found nothing. They told me the guy probably sat in a car and they followed me. Just kids being kids, they said. My dog didn't come out of my bedroom for the rest of the night. I sat up listening to silence until my husband got home. A couple of weeks later, someone from the sheriff's office stopped by for a follow-up. They said they checked the camera at the gas station, but all it shows is the girl walking up by the dumpsters and standing there until I left, and then she walks away. Number 1. I live in Buckinghamshire, England, in a quiet town on the furthest outskirts of London. It's kind of a suburb, but hardly urban. It's mostly woods. There are some meadows and some farmlands, and a few pockets of middle-class red brick neighborhoods here and there. A small high street and the fresh-smelling air makes you realize how far you actually are from the heart of London. And there was a secondary school, the one that I attended at the time. I was 15 years old, it was July, and the summer holidays had almost begun. There was just 1 week of school left. It was Friday evening and my parents had gone to visit some family friends. I didn't want to join them, so instead I decided to call one of my friends, two 15-year-old girls hanging out alone at night. It sounds like the setup for a horror film now that I think back on it. We hung out in the living room, just chatting and chilling and getting something from the fridge every now and again. There wasn't anything worth watching on TV, and we were in the mood for a film, so we decided to go out and rent a DVD from the local video store. It's about a 15 to 20 minute walk to the store, and it cuts across a public park and some quiet old neighborhoods. So we get there and pick up some horror movies, because what else are you going to watch when you're home alone with friends? Anyway, we pay and set off towards home. But as we get near the end of the high street, my friend whispers to me to keep walking, but to look behind us. We both turn our heads, and I see what she's trying to show me. There was a man standing about 30 yards behind us on the footpath. He was wearing a trench coat, which was weird because it was hot and we were in shorts and vests. But the weirdest thing about him was that he wore a mask on his face. One of those plain white expressionless masks with holes for the eyes and mouth. Naturally, we were pretty spooked. I remember thinking that it was either a prankster or someone genuinely up to no good, like a robber or something, who didn't want to be identified. At any rate, we didn't feel at all comfortable and quickened our pace. To our horror, he began to slowly come after us. He had a metal crutch in one hand, like one you would lean against if you injured your foot. But he didn't look injured, at least from the way he walked. He wasn't limping or anything. That's when we began to feel afraid. My friend suggested that we call someone who lives nearby. We knew plenty, but our hearts sank when we realized that neither of us brought our phones. We just walked even faster and didn't look back. We only turned when we were halfway home. He wasn't behind us. We sighed in relief and hurried home. When we got back, we shut the door behind us and collapsed on the sofa together, laughing and just relieved that nothing more frightening had happened. We played one of our films, turned out the lights and began watching. Halfway through the film, my friend suddenly muted the sound and told me to listen. I became aware of a sound outside the house. My parents were not supposed to be back until much later, so this rang alarm bells. We tiptoed to the window and peered out. When we saw who was out there, we were overwhelmed with a heavy feeling of dread. You guessed it. It was the man in the blank mask. I don't know if he saw us. It was hard to tell through the mask, but he was facing roughly in our direction, facing the front door, just standing there, as if he was contemplating on forcing it open. We instantly ran upstairs and hid in the bathroom of my parents' bedroom, with the lights off, of course. We had seen enough films and documentaries to know that something very bad could happen to us that night if we had gave ourselves away. We rang my friend's brother and told him to come quickly and bring a weapon. Her brother was a university student at the time. Better still, he was 6'2" and an avid rugby player and had the physique for the sport. He understood and told us, his voice full of concern, that he would be there shortly. We waited there for probably 5 to 10 minutes before my friend's brother pulled into the driveway. He and 2 of his friends came out of the car wielding cricket bats. They rang the doorbell, and cautiously we made our way downstairs to let them in. "Where is he?" was the first thing they asked us. We explained that the man had just been outside the front door when we last saw him, but we had no clue where he could have shifted off to. Perhaps he had left. We certainly hoped so. There was the frightening possibility that the man might still be there. One of the boys watched the door while one shone a torch around outside, and I, my friend, and her brother went through the house, turning on all the lights and searching every room and wardrobe. We found nobody. Perplexed, shaken, but most of all relieved, the 5 of us sat in the living room and discussed in depth what happened and tried to calm our nerves. It was like we were telling each other a campfire story, except we were part of the story. My parents arrived later and everything was explained. My mother called the police. We had decided to call our friend's brother instead, because the nearest police station was farther than my friend's house. Also, he was way more likely to care about the situation than the local police. Thankfully, nothing weird happened after that. Nobody ever saw the masked man again. But there's something that made this whole thing a little creepier. The next school year, I was talking to my history teacher, who actually went to the same school himself many years ago. I ended up mentioning this event, just because I get along with him really well, and I felt like telling him. It is, after all, an interesting story. Anyway, after I tell him about the masked man, his expression grew deeply thoughtful, as if he was trying to remember something. Then he told me this. He said that back when he was a student at the school in the mid-1970s, there had been rumors circulating among the students about a loner who lived in the woods outside of town. Rumor had it that he wore a blank mask and only came out at night so that nobody could identify him. There were other wilder rumors that said the man was a rapist, or a devil worshipper, or a cannibal, but those were likely just elaborations. Anyway, my teacher said that he and his friends had never seen any such man, and dismissed the rumors as just a creepy local myth, and nothing more. Now, I'm not saying that the man who stalked us is the same man from those rumors. It's probably just a creepy coincidence. That guy could have been anybody, and the guy in the rumors could have never existed. My teacher even could have made it up, though I think it would be very out of character for him. But I guess it makes the already creepy story even creepier, to think that a mysterious masked man could have been living in the woods near this quiet town for almost 40 years, and to think it might have been the same man who followed me and my friend home that night.
There's always a reason to be afraid.